I woke up at 2:11 a.m. because someone was standing over my bed. At first, I thought it was a dream. Hospitals mess with your sleep. Lights hum, machines beep. Your brain fills in gaps. But then I smelled latex and disinfectant, stronger than usual, and I heard breathing that wasn't mine. I couldn't move, not even my fingers. The chart at the foot of my bed was flipped open, pages rustling slowly, like someone taking their time. A voice whispered numbers, not my name, not my condition, just measurements. Depth first, another voice said, calm and bored. A face leaned into my field of vision, mask on, eyes uncovered, not tired, curious, like I was an object that finally stopped resisting. I tried to scream, my mouth opened, but nothing came out. My tongue felt thick, useless. Something cold touched my abdomen, not painful, not yet. A fingertip traced a line, pressing just enough to test resistance. No scar history, the voice murmured. Good. I felt pressure, then a sharp heat, quick and precise. My body jerked, but the paralysis held. Tears ran sideways into my ears. Relax, someone said, almost kindly. This is how we learn. I didn't pass out. That was the worst part. They worked in silence after that. Not rushed, not tense. Like this was a routine they'd done 100 times already. I felt them open me, not ripping, not sawing, just a clean entry that told me they knew exactly where to cut. Pain came in waves, sharp enough to make my vision flicker, controlled enough to keep me awake. Someone adjusted a light, someone else pressed deeper. Still responsive, a voice said. Good muscle tone. I tried to shake my head. Nothing happened. Metal clicked against metal. I felt something being moved inside me, lifted, set aside. My stomach cramped hard enough that my back arched on its own, but straps held me down. I hadn't noticed them before. They were already there. I heard a pen scratching paper. Note how little bleeding there is, one of them said. Day staff never get this clean. Day staff. That word broke something in me. These weren't intruders. They weren't imposters. They belonged here. I felt stitches begin, too early. Whatever they had done wasn't finished, but they were closing me anyway. Practice round, someone said. We'll reopen later. The light switched off. Footsteps moved away. A door opened, then closed. The paralysis faded slowly. When I finally screamed, the room was empty. Morning staff found me screaming. That's what the nurse said later anyway. She kept her voice low, careful, like I might shatter if she spoke normally. She told me I'd had a panic episode, in night terrors, a bad reaction to anesthesia residue, all things that happen apparently. But panic episodes don't leave stitches. When I lifted the blanket, my hand started shaking so badly I couldn't hold it up. A fresh line of sutures ran across my abdomen. Clean, professional, too neat to be an accident, too deliberate to explain away. The nurse froze when she saw them. She tried to recover fast, but I caught it. The split second where she didn't know what to say. She told me I must have been taken for an emergency procedure overnight, that it happens sometimes, that it would all be in my chart. It wasn't. A doctor came, then another. They whispered outside my curtain, arguing in clipped tones. When they finally spoke to me, their stories didn't match. Different reasons, different times, different signatures. I asked for security footage. They said the cameras in my wing had been down overnight. I asked who was on night shift. They gave me names I didn't recognize. When I asked to see them, they said the shift had already ended. That night, they kept the lights on. I didn't sleep. At 2:11 a.m., I heard footsteps stop outside my door. The footsteps didn't move past my door. They stopped right outside, close enough that I could hear fabric shift, someone adjusting their stance. I stared at the handle, waiting for it to turn. It didn't. Instead, the door creaked open slowly, just enough for a sliver of hallway light to cut across the floor. The curtain around my bed rustled as someone slipped inside. I smelled them again. Latex. Disinfectant. Something faintly metallic. "You remember more than most," a voice whispered. Not the same one as before. Younger, careful. "That complicates things." I reached for the call button. My arm barely moved. Heavy, sluggish, like my body was sinking into wet concrete. A hand pressed my wrist down. "We told you to relax last time," the voice said. No anger, just disappointment. Another figure stepped closer, masked, familiar eyes, curious again. "Chart says you heal well," they murmured. "That makes you valuable." Cold spread across my abdomen as scissors snipped the stitches open. Not all of them, just enough. Pain punched the air out of my lungs. My scream came out broken, weak. "Don't worry," someone said. "We'll fix you before morning." I felt them go deeper than before. Slower. More confident. From the hallway, I heard carts rolling, voices laughing, day shift arriving. No one came in. No one ever does. I woke up with my mouth dry and my throat raw, like I'd been screaming for hours. Morning light filtered through the blinds. Machines beeped softly. Everything looked normal enough to make me doubt myself. For a few seconds, I almost believed it had been a hallucination. Then I tried to sit up. Pain exploded through my torso, deeper than before, wrong, like something inside me had been rearranged and didn't agree with the new layout. I lifted the blanket with shaking hands. The stitches were back, more of them, longer, crisscrossed, not just one clean line. My skin was swollen and bruised in places I hadn't been touched during surgery. A new band sat on my wrist. Yellow. High-risk patient. A doctor came in smiling too quickly. He didn't look at my face when he spoke. His eyes stayed on the chart. "You had complications overnight," he said. "Unexpected anatomy. We had to intervene." I asked him to explain. He paused, then said, "You're alive. That's the important part." When he left, I noticed something under my fingernails. Dark, dried, blood, not all of it mine. At noon, an orderly changed my sheets. He leaned close and whispered, so quietly I barely heard it. "They liked you," he said. "That's not good." That night, they didn't bother sneaking. They wheeled my bed into the hall themselves. They pushed me past rooms that were supposed to be occupied, curtains drawn, monitors unplugged, beds made too neatly, like no one had ever been there. The wheels of my bed rattled softly over the floor seams, steady and unhurried. No one tried to hide us. Nurses passed by and didn't look, or looked and chose not to see. We went down a corridor I hadn't seen before. No windows, no call buttons. The lights were dimmer here, tinted yellow instead of white. A door opened with a keypad, then another. They rolled me into a room that didn't smell sterile. It smelled warm. Old, used, metal trays were laid out already, not covered, tools arranged in pairs, like comparisons. I saw needles bent slightly at the tips, sutures already threaded. A recorder on the counter, red light blinking. "This one stays awake," someone said. I felt the familiar heaviness creep into my limbs, but not all the way this time, just enough to keep me weak. enough to make every movement cost something. Pain teaches precision, a voice said. I recognized it now. The first one, the curious one. They didn't rush. They explained what they were doing as they did it. What worked? What didn't? Where people usually broke. When I begged, they corrected my breathing. When I screamed, they took notes. Somewhere above us, a hospital announcement chimed. Visiting hours. They told me I was here for observation. That word came up a lot during intake. Observation, like I was an object they needed to watch until it behaved. They took my phone, my clothes, my shoes, gave me gray scrubs that smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet underneath it, like rotting fruit masked with chemicals. The doors locked behind me with a soft sound. Not a slam. A careful click that scared me more. My chart said acute stress reaction. I asked what that meant. The nurse smiled without looking at me and said, "It meant I was lucky. Lucky people got beds on the 3rd floor. Unlucky people went lower." The ward was quiet in a way that didn't feel calm. No TVs, no talking, just the hum of lights and the distant squeal of metal on metal, like gurneys being dragged slowly across tiles somewhere far away or below us. There were other patients, some sitting perfectly still, staring at walls, some missing things they shouldn't have been missing. A man with his left arm, wrapped in thick bandages, kept rocking and whispering. They took the bad one, over and over. I asked another patient how long he'd been here. He leaned close and whispered back, "Until something fails." That night, they checked my vitals 3 times. They didn't check anyone else's, and sometime after midnight, I heard the elevator come up from the basement, empty on the way up, heavy on the way down. The next morning, breakfast was liquid. They called it nutrition therapy, a thick, gray drink poured into identical cups. No one complained. The man with the bandaged arm drank his without blinking, like he was afraid it would be taken away if he hesitated. After breakfast, they separated us, not by diagnosis, by bodies. An orderly walked the line, stopping in front of people, pressing fingers into necks, wrists, ribs. He didn't ask questions. He tested. When he reached me, he lifted my eyelids with his thumb, checked my teeth, then nodded once. A small mark appeared on my wrist with a pen. A circle. I noticed who else had circles. Maybe people who could stand straight. People who still made eye contact. People who hadn't started talking to the walls yet. The rest were marked with lines. Or nothing at all. Therapy that day wasn't group. It was imaging. They slid me into a machine that hummed low and steady, while something warm passed slowly over my abdomen. A doctor stood behind glass, speaking into a recorder. "Kidneys look clean," he said calmly. "Heart rhythm stable, lungs acceptable." Acceptable for what, I wanted to ask. I didn't get the chance. That evening, the man with the bandaged arm was gone. So was his bed. I asked the nurse where he'd been transferred. She corrected me without changing her tone. "Used," she said. That was the first time I tried to leave. After lights out, when the ward settled into its artificial sleep, I tested the door. Locked. I expected that. What I didn't expect was the sound on the other side. Breathing. Slow. Patient. Like whoever stood there knew I wasn't going anywhere. They came for someone 2 rooms down at 2:14 a.m. No alarms. No shouting. Just orderlies rolling a bed down the hall, wheels squealing softly. The patient woke up screaming anyway. A woman. I'd heard her crying earlier, begging staff not to open her again. I didn't understand what that meant until they passed my door. Her gown was soaked dark at the abdomen. Fresh. Her hands were strapped down, fingers clawing uselessly at air. As they rolled her past, she locked eyes with me and shook her head once. Not help. Don't. By morning, her room was empty. Her name disappeared from the board. At therapy, they showed us a video. Smiling doctors. Clean rooms. A calm voice explaining how psychiatric facilities partnered with advanced medical programs to maximize patient contribution to society. Some people can't get better, the voice said gently, but they can still be useful. After lunch, my wrist circle was traced over in red. That evening, a man I hadn't seen before sat beside me and whispered without looking up, "They're running low on livers." Then he lifted his shirt. The stitches were still bleeding. They moved me the same night. No warning, no explanation. 2 orderlies woke me by turning on the light and pulling the sheet off my body. One held my shoulders down, while the other injected something cold into my thigh. I didn't go unconscious. I just became slow, heavy, trapped behind my own eyes. They wheeled me past the elevator, down a hallway I hadn't seen before. The smell changed, cleaner, sharper, under it, iron. Rooms lined the corridor, each with glass walls and drawn curtains. I saw shapes behind some of them, human shapes that didn't move. Machines breathed for them. Monitors beeped calmly, like nothing was wrong. They parked me outside a room marked pre-op. A doctor finally spoke to me there. He crouched, so we were eye level, like he cared. "You should feel proud," he said. "You stayed functional longer than most." I tried to scream. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. He checked a tablet. "Heart's still strong, we'll keep that. 1 kidney too. You only need 1. They began strapping my arms down. That's when I heard banging. From inside the operating room. The curtain twitched, and a hand pressed against the glass from the other side. Bloody, shaking, alive. The doctor sighed, irritated. "Restraints again?" he muttered. Then he looked back at me and smiled. "Don't worry," he said. "You won't feel what they take." He was wrong. I felt the first cut. I didn't pass out. I waited for that mercy. For the world to blink off, but it never came. The drug kept me awake while stealing my body from me. I felt pressure first. Hands inside me, rearranging things that had always belonged where they were. Someone narrated quietly, like this was routine. Clamp. Suction. Fiable. Pain came late and wrong, like my nerves were confused about what to report. When it hit fully, it flooded everything. I screamed inside my head while my mouth hung open, useless. At some point, something went wrong. Monitors spiked, voices sharpened, someone cursed. "Too much blood loss," a nurse said. "We're losing him." The doctor hesitated. I felt it. That pause was worse than the cutting. "Fine," he said. "Take the backup." They rolled another bed beside mine. I saw the patient's face for half a second. Young, awake, crying, marked with a red circle like mine had been. They cut him open while I watched. They used his blood to keep me alive. When I woke up later, I was back on the 3rd floor, bandaged, hollow. Something essential missing that I couldn't name yet. The board listed me as stable. Across the hall, a new patient was being admitted. I watched them draw a small circle on his wrist. And for the first time since I arrived, I understood the truth. Getting better wasn't the goal. Lasting longer was. They adjusted my medication after that. Less painkillers, more stabilizers, enough clarity to walk, to eat, to answer questions, not enough strength to fight. The nurse told me this meant I was responding well. She said it like it was a compliment. I noticed things after surgery. People avoided looking at me. Patients with circles watched me with a quiet hunger, like I was proof of something they didn't want to accept yet. Patients with lines stared openly at my bandages, counting what was left. My reflection changed. My skin looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit anymore. When I pressed a hand to my abdomen, there was a hollow ache beneath it, deep and constant, like something was missing its echo. At night, they rolled carts through the halls. Metal trays, coolers, labels. I could hear the numbers being read aloud. Blood types, compatibility, expiration times. One night, the man who warned me about livers tried to hang himself with his bed sheet. They stopped him quickly, efficiently. He was wheeled away, still breathing. The next morning, the drink tasted richer. I stopped drinking it halfway through. A nurse leaned close and whispered, almost kindly, "If you refuse nutrition, you'll be reassigned." I finished every drop. Later that day, a doctor stopped at my bed and checked my chart. "Good news," he said. "Your heart's holding up." He paused, then added, "For now." And I realized the worst part. Surviving didn't make me safe. It just made me inventory.